Or maybe it's my head. Trouble?
No, just a little unusual circumstance. So we are live right now.
I said, Bill O'Reilly said, all right, we'll do it live. We'll do it live. Although
we are doing it live. We're just not doing what we were supposed to be doing right now. So if anybody's watching, just pretend you didn't see this.
Yeah, well, think of it, Kate, is
so okay, here we go.
Welcome to Soulfire Wisdom with Kate Olson. As an evolving spirit and change adventure navigator, it is Kate's mission to empower and guide you on your path and inspire your truest passions. She will encourage you to share your gifts, speak your truth, and ignite your inner wisdom and purpose. She hopes to do so with a little humor and grace and her own soulfire passion. Kate talks with amazing guests who have embraced the pursuit and are fanning the flames of their own passion, purpose, and soulfire wisdom. Now here's your host, Kate.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Soulfire Wisdom and Totally Awesome, Try Something New and Talk About It Tuesday. Except we're not going to talk about anything new this Tuesday. Instead, I want to talk to Frank King, who is my guest today, about 2020 before we get started talking about understanding and preventing suicide. So, hi, Frank. How are you?
Kate, and I have to apologize to everybody who tuned in last time when I didn't show up. I am Kate Olson's problem child. I am, as comedians go, Kate, I'm like the Ward Cleaver of comedy. I'm usually, compared to other comedians, pretty responsible, but compared to regular human beings, I'm a mess. So I apologize for anybody who tuned in last time and I wasn't here.
That's okay, Frank. I was set. That show would have been the 1 year anniversary of the show.
Oh God.
And you were the only one all year that didn't show up.
Oh,
so you made an impact,
Yes, that's not the sort of impact we want to make. As the young people say,
this is 2020, so So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. You've kind of been in the middle of everything this year.
Right?
Starting out in February when you started off to go on a cruise.
Yes, we sailed from Singapore on the 1st of February.
Yeah.
Actually, there were two ships in the neighborhood, Kate. There was the Westerdam I was on, Holland America. And then there was the Diamond Princess. And the Westerdam wisely refused to allow anybody who'd been to mainland China to board. The Diamond Princess allowed people from mainland China to board. And of the 2,500 passengers and crew on my ship, nobody ever came down with the virus. Of course, the Crown Princess was ravaged.
Yeah.
Problem is, people conflated the two cruise ships because we were pretty much in the same neighborhood in the Western Pacific. And I made the mistake of joking about jumping quarantine at the hotel and coming back. I thought it was a lark. And we were never quarantined, but the press picked that up. And I was a worldwide pariah for about 2 weeks. I had to change my home phone number, shut down 3 social media accounts. I mean, I had to handle death threats.
I saw some of those comments. It was really not good.
No.
You were quarantined on that ship for quite a while, though.
No, actually, we were never quarantined.
Well, I mean, you were stuck on the ship.
Well, we were stuck on the ship for a number of days. The cruise was 2 weeks. We were turned down by 5 different countries to dock. we finally were allowed to dock, and then we went to a hotel. We flew to a hotel, and then because a woman supposedly tested positive in Kuala Lumpur, they froze everybody in place. Still no quarantine, but and when my contract was up, I paid for my own ticket. I flew on Emirates Air for like $1,500 to come home because I had engagements, and I was healthy. And the CDC guy from the U.S. was there in the hotel, and he goes, "Frank, there's no reason you can't go home. Go."
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I wish I'd stayed and just zoomed the gigs, but it's hindsight, Kate. It's
Yes, and then I saw people were really not happy with you for doing that.
no, a guy called me up, matter of fact, and said to me, "You came back to this county to kill everybody." I said, "No, I've got a list, and you just made the VIP section."
Well, so then you got back finally.
Got back and was able to change my home phone number, and 3 weeks later, reactivate all my social media accounts. I never really understood as a 63-year-old man how internet, online bullying or internet bullying. I thought, how bad could it be? Because when we were kids, it was usually in the locker room and very up close and personal. And when you left the school, you left the bully behind. But nowadays, young people, they carry the bully home with them, as I did. And I mean, it was vicious.
Yes.
I have a whole new respect for that sort of bullying. I don't know, because all those people that bullied me, I'll never see, chances are. But a young person is being bullied online by the people they're going to school with every day. I'm not sure I could handle that.
Yeah, and it's not stuff that you can reply to. I mean, you think you can. You think you can just use some logic, but it's just not that way.
No, it's the cancel culture. Actually, I'm working on I've already pitched it once. It's called, called Going Viral, How the Cancel Culture and the Coronavirus Killed My Comedy Career. Because people said, we're going to make sure you never work again in comedy clubs, at which point I wrote back, and I get that in writing. Because I never want to work another comedy club. It's a young man's business, young person's business. But anyway, it'll make a good TEDx talk.
So it kind of, not just you, but everybody, it kind of did away with work for a while.
Yes, in the events business, conference business, it's, I've done an average of one virtual presentation every month. Most of them were rescheduled from live, although 2 have been recently scheduled from virtual from the beginning. So people are now figuring, look, it's going to last too long. We're going to have to get together. Let's go virtual. So we got the green screen, and I have a background that I use, and a wireless mic, and I stand up so it looks like a keynote, and I actually have them turn on the mics, unmute everybody. With a small audience. Large audience, we use the chat box, and I tell the moderator, look, question pops up in the chat box, interrupt me. Frank, Bob wants to know. So it's a little bit interactive, but of course it's not the same as being.
Yeah. Is it harder to do without that audience feedback?
Well, because I started my career in comedy clubs, many of them were horrible one-nighters, oftentimes with a very small crowd. We're talking 3 to 6 people. So I'm so used to talking to furniture.
Okay.
I just smile and deliver like nothing's wrong. So it's not that difficult for me, but I know for a lot of speakers who've never had that experience of speaking to an empty room for 45 minutes, I can imagine how difficult, because they're used to getting that constant feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you were just getting used to coronavirus and the wildfires.
Oh God. Yeah, what a year.
Yes.
I came home on a Sunday night, the 6th of September. And it was the strangest thing that there was really thick smoke in the air, the wind blowing gusts turned out to be 50 miles an hour gusts. And I said to my neighbor, what, did the doors of Hades open and it was blowing down the river valley? And what I didn't know was that the 50 mile an hour gust upriver had knocked the power pole down and started a wildfire, because we hadn't had any rain in a month or more. And it took off, and it came within 1.25 miles of our house. We were evacuated for 2 weeks.
Yes.
And I actually was downtown when we went. I don't know if whoever's listening knows, but with a wildfire, there are 3 levels. Level 1 warning is get ready. Level 2 warning is get set. In other words, pack, get everything ready. And level 3 is go, because wildfires move so fast sometimes you can't outdrive them. And so I'm downtown. We were level 1 when I left to go to my cardiology appointment. I got an alert on my phone. You're now level 3. What happened to level 2? Well, we have 11 rescue cats. So I had to drive back into a wildfire to rescue the kitty cats. Because we're like the Marines. We don't leave anybody behind. So the police are going down the streets. Their lights flashing. They're blowing the horn, telling me, get out, get out, get out. And I'm coming in. And I was the last one in the neighborhood. And we made it out, fortunately. And everybody made it back. But it was a little touch and go there we thought the house was going to be gone.
Yeah.
And we were refinancing, Kate. So I called my mortgage broker and I said, look, a business etiquette question for you. If the title company doesn't ask, do I have to tell them to burn to the ground? Yeah, fortunately, well, it was still level 3 when we signed the paperwork. And I kept waiting for the title company to ask me, well, Frank, this address, it's in a level 3 area right now. Is it still standing? But I don't think they wanted to know. So
or maybe they just didn't look up that stuff because they pretty much they follow like procedures.
Yeah. Sign here, sign here. And that the title company really doesn't care. It's not their money. It's the mortgage company's money. So
yeah.
Anyway, we refinanced, paid off all our unsecured and credit card debt. Whew, thank you, Lord. Because we don't know how long the pandemic's going to go. And in the conference entertainment event business, that's my bread and butter. Fortunately, I also coach TEDx talks.
Yeah. Those are kind of on hold too.
Well, actually, they're happening virtually this fall, or they postpone them to the following year. But what a lot of people don't know, I just sent all my coaching clients about a dozen TEDx application links for the first quarter of next year. And these groups, they think they're going to be able to do them live, but of course, there's a little asterisk in every one of them that says, by the way, if you can't do it live, we're going to do it virtual. So it's a good time if you want a TEDx talk to apply, because a lot of people think they're not happening. And so the numbers of applications undoubtedly would be down.
Oh, well.
Yep.
Great, I guess.
Yep. I mean, it's a silver lining in the pandemic cloud.
So I guess there's almost nobody that wouldn't agree that 2020 has been a pretty unbelievable year.
And my wife broke her hip.
Oh, she did. Oh my
She's walking
goodness.
her dogs, we have 3 German Shepherds. She's watching 2 of the German Shepherds. She's got the youngest one on a leash, so she's not really paying attention. And he must have seen something, and he lunged, and she went flying and landed on her hip, and it fractured. Yep. She had to get up, walk back to the car with a broken hip, load the dogs with a broken hip, drive home, and then she called me. And I probably should have called an ambulance. She called me. I came home, took her to the hospital, and she's got 2 screws about this long. 3 screws, actually.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it didn't break it where she had to have it replaced. It just fractured. But it's been one of those years. It's just like.
So I have a question related to that will bring us into talking about the topic for today.
Yeah.
And that is, so, all of this that's been going on has been just like horrific. So and it's added stress for everybody, and I'm sure for you too. So with your history of depression and suicidal thinking, has it led you to that kind of thinking this year, or how have you reacted to this year?
Well, I realized early on that as a mentally ill person who's high functioning, therapy and medication and so forth, that I was well positioned to help neuronormal or neurotypical people survive. I actually wrote a keynote called Social Distancing and Staying Sane. Don't worry about your mentally ill friends. Because with mental illness, you wake up every day in an uncertain world, whether there's a pandemic or not. So you develop something called a self-care plan. And so I've been teaching in podcasts, radio interviews, and so forth, teaching normal people how to create a self-care plan and other techniques that mentally ill people use every day to be able to get out of bed, put your feet on the floor, and walk through the world. And so for me and my mentally ill friends, it's not that much different than every day, regardless of pandemic. So it's kind of like being in the cast of The Walking Dead for 10 years, and then there's a zombie apocalypse. But you've been in the cast of The Walking Dead. You're like, I got this. We built a fort. We plant some vegetables. You got to stick them in the head to kill them. So
Okay.
I've got the skill set to survive the. So for me, it's not. I
Okay, well that explains something. It was my theory that the problems that you imagine are worse than when you're actually having real problems, because when you're having real problems, you can try to deal with them, but it's harder to deal with those imaginary ones.
Yes, and that's part of what I teach normal people, is that you have to control the things you can control, and you have to have, like I said, a self-care plan. Mine is diet, exercise, good night's sleep, medication, meditation, and also you have to have a routine, because your routine is most people's is completely. Used to they go to work at 8 and get off at 5 and play softball on the weekends or whatever, but it's just that's all been thrown out the window.
Yeah.
People having difficulty. So they interviewed an astronaut who'd been in the space station for a year. And they said, how'd you manage that social isolation? He said, one word: routine. He said, I go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time, eat my meal at the same time, exercise the same time every day, my recreation time, same time. So it's a matter of organizing your world in such a way. And that's what, it's oftentimes people with mental illness need, that structure self-imposed to get out. And I have this thing called gamification. And oftentimes people with depression or other mental illnesses have difficulty getting out of bed in the morning, myself included. So what I do is I make a game of it. I make a to-do list of 6 things. And the way I win the game is when I scratch off number 6, I can go back to bed, pull the covers over my head, binge watch Netflix. I don't care if it's 3 in the afternoon, broad daylight, because I win. So that's how I get myself out of bed, is I play the game. I get to the gym when I could go to the gym. It's 25 minutes away. My deal with me is, if I get to the gym, get in the gym, all I have to do is 1 rep of 1 exercise. I can turn around and go home. So that gets me to the gym. And I half hour and a half. I've never done one. Well, okay, I'm done. So it's called gamification. It's and I do something called half-hour power. I can do almost anything for half an hour. So on my to-do list, let's say I've got taxes to do and they're due, because tomorrow, October 15th is coming up. A lot of people have taxes due.
Me.
Oh, great. So what I'll do is I'll do taxes for half an hour, and then I'll do something else on the list for half an hour, like cut the grass. And then, but every other half an hour, I come back and I do my taxes. So I'm not strapping myself to my desk and thinking I've got to get through all these taxes. I get a break every half an hour and do something else. And then I come back and do every other half an hour until the taxes are done. So it's a way of structuring your day to, be able to move through it and get things accomplished.
Yeah, I can see how that would help. So after you were a writer for the Tonight Show for 20 years, and then what came first? Did you do the TEDx talks first, or did you start doing the comedy?
I started comedy in 1985, the day after Christmas. I booked myself. It was kind of the beginning of the comedy club boom. I booked myself for 10 weeks, which I thought was forever. And I asked my girlfriend, now my wife of 33 years, hey, you want to come along? And she goes, yeah. Surprised me. And so we were on the road together doing stand-up. I was doing stand-up. She came along for the ride for 2,629 nights in a row.
Wow.
Did a little radio. And then by 95, the comedy club thing had gone bust. But I was a very clean act, so I jumped to the corporate comedy circuit. And I did that till 2007 when the recession hit. And the business dropped off 80% overnight. And in 2010, I learned what the barrel of my gun tastes like after we filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
Ooh.
And when I began to speak again, the meeting planner said, Frank, we love you dearly, but we cannot pay you that kind of money just to be funny. You need to teach our audience something. So I thought, what? And I bought a book by Judy Carter called The Message of You, Turning Your Life into a Money-Making Speaking Career. And I went into the book thinking I got nothing. And about halfway through, because she leads you down this path, almost fill in the blank. And I thought, oh my goodness, my family history of depression, suicide, my near suicide. I could get some training on preventing suicide and add my humor, comic relief, and I could be a suicide prevention speaker. The trick was, how am I going to rebrand when everybody thinks I'm just funny? And my wife goes, do a TEDx. And I said famously, what's a TEDx? And that week I got an email from a TEDx in Vancouver, BC, and they said, would you like to apply? Sure. And I got it. And I used that opportunity on stage at a TEDx to come out as depressed and suicidal. Nobody knew. My wife, my family, my friends had any idea that I lived with major depressive disorder and chronic suicidal ideation. And it allowed me to, that TEDx allowed me to rebrand as not a funny speaker, but a speaker who's funny. And that one, I got 2 phone calls from 2 different TEDx committees, and they asked if I had another mental health TEDx in me. And I said yes and yes. So that was my second and third. And then I had another idea, so I applied for a 4th. That was Suicide, the Secret of My Success, Dead Man Talking. And then I applied for my 5th, which was Mental Health and the Orgasm, Treat Your Depression Single-Handedly.
Wow, okay.
Which was my funniest, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
when I coached TEDx, I said, look, the title subtitle is very important because they get a couple hundred applications. So whatever you put in the title and subtitle box, better grab their attention. And those last 2, the last 2 I did, they liked the title, subtitle, and the idea so much, I didn't even have to audition. They just said, you're on.
oh, well, having prior TEDx talks probably helps.
Yes. And, it was interesting. It was entertaining. It was, they knew I was a comedian. And so, but that led me to believe that I could teach other people to do the same. Make the application interesting because they get a lot of them, and they're not looking for a reason to book it. They're looking for the first reason to throw you in the no pile. So that's basically what I do for my clients is make sure that application is sticky and they can't put it down.
So the combination of comedy and suicide, it isn't, doesn't seem to fit. First thought, how does that work?
Well, and I always, when I'm doing a keynote, address the elephant in the room, which is exactly that, Kate. So I say to them, I know what you're thinking. Comedian, suicide, how does that work? A couple things. Comedian, good choice, I believe. Because you think about the first comedian was a court jester, and the court jester's job was to speak truth to power, the king or queen, on behalf of those powerless, with humor. And I believe I speak truth to the power of mental illness on behalf of those often powerless in its grip with humor. Number 2, I believe where there is laughter, there is life. Where there's humor, there is hope. Nobody dies laughing. And of course, having my grandmother died by suicide, my mother found her, my great aunt died by suicide, my mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days. It's called generational depression and suicide. So that gives me the chops to, and of course, I put a gun in my mouth. So that gives me the credibility to speak on that topic. And it resonates with people in the audience who are living with mental illness. They realize very quickly that I hear the same music they do. And I got to tell you, I always do a little Q&A at the end for the audience, the general audience. And I say to the audience, look, here's the deal. You got a question you don't want to ask in front of everybody? Like, hey, I'm crazy. Can you help me? I'll hang out. After we're done, I'll answer every question individually till we're done. Sometimes it's 1 person, sometimes it's 8 lined up. Because what I discovered, Kay, was even though hardly anybody talks about depression and thoughts of suicide, if you bring it up, almost everyone has a mental health story.
Yeah.
So my job is essentially, and they tell me this all the time when I get there, we just brought you in to start the conversation on suicide.
Yeah. Why is this so hard to talk about? Whenever you do bring up the subject, like you just said, everybody has questions about it.
Yep.
Most people know someone, if they haven't had those thoughts themselves, know someone who has either been through it, and a lot of people know someone who's actually succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
And so why is this so hard to talk about?
Well, it's frightening, I think, for people who are neuronormal, neurotypical, for a number of reasons. One is they either don't know what to say when somebody brings a topic up, or they're fearful they'll say the wrong thing. There's an old urban legend that you should never mention the word suicide in front of somebody who's depressed, because get this, it might give them the idea. Trust me, it's crossed their mind. As a matter of fact, the reverse is true. Excuse me, if you bring it up, you mention it, if you ask them, are you having thoughts of suicide, the chance they'll die by suicide drops significantly. And here's why. 8 out of 10 people, roughly, who are suicidal are ambivalent. They want somebody to notice something and interrupt. 9 out of 10 people who are actively suicidal give hints in the last 7 days leading up to the attempt, direct, indirect, verbal, nonverbal, behavioral. So what I teach in my keynote is signs and symptoms of depression and thoughts of suicide, what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do, and resources. That's basically my keynote. That's the curriculum that I teach. So that if you notice something about someone after you heard me speak, depression, it's, if somebody has trouble getting up in the morning, but kind of rallies in the afternoon, that's a sign. A big one, and you can even see this on Zoom, is they let their personal hygiene go. There's COVID casual. My clothes are clean. You can't see my hair, but it's clean. But if you're on Zoom and you notice, gosh, their hair's not quite as clean, the clothes look dirty. It may be because they're struggling to get out of bed to the bathroom to, do their stuff and then run a little wash. What I'm worried about, Kate, is the neurotypical, neuronormal people who are experiencing what they call situational depression due to the pandemic, COVID, and social distancing. I worry that some of these folks, because they've never experienced depression, have no idea what it is. Why am I feeling this way? I always advise, have a telemedicine appointment with a mental health professional and just discuss it and see if, in fact, you have the symptoms of situational depression. If you do, short-term use of antidepressants, it's not a life sentence. You can just be on it as long as this lasts until you can sort of right yourself, and then just taper off. And by the way, there's a technique that I always recommend when somebody prescribes a psychotropic. You can get a DNA cheek swab. They take your DNA, they send it to the lab, and they try to match your DNA to the antidepressant or anti-anxiety or antipsychotic medication that works best with your particular metabolism. So it eliminates a lot of the kind of lab rat aspects. You go on, doesn't work, you taper off. You go on, doesn't work, taper off. And also I advise, the doctor often only knows what the drug rep told them. So always ask your pharmacist, because that's their job. I always ask, anytime I get a new medication, I have that consult with the pharmacist and we have a detailed conversation. Should I be taking my cholesterol medication, and what are the side effects? Should they be, are they shouldn't eat or drink? So anyway, that's what I recommend.
So are you on medication currently?
Yes, I have waited till I was 60. My wife goes, look, honey, you're 60. Ask your doctor. So I went in. The doctor is supposed to ask you every time you go 2 gateway questions about your mental health. They're supposed to say, are you taking less joy in your social activities than you did, in the previous month or so? And I guess, have you felt hopeless in the last 2 weeks? And they're supposed to ask that every time they see you. And then if you say yes to one of those, there's 7 more questions, more detailed. But my physician never asked me. So I had to tell him I was depressed and suicidal. So he wrote me a script for Wellbutrin. And about half the people who take it hate it, and the other half just swear by it. And it worked for me like that. And so it's, it doesn't make me giddy, but takes the edge off, shortens the time that I'm down when I do go down, and extends the time between the incidents of it, because major depressive disorder, 2 days to 2 weeks, and it recurs. So with the medication, it doesn't happen as often, and it's not quite as deep and long as it was before.
Okay. So you mentioned people being afraid to say something to someone who is either, giving blatant signs of being so suicidal, or someone who isn't, and they just sort of suspect that something's going on. Is it possible to, as they say, push someone over the edge, by bringing up the topic?
Research shows the opposite is true. Again, if 8 out of 10 are ambivalent, 9 out of 10 give hints. And here's some signs, because suppose they're not forthcoming. If you flat out ask them, are you thinking, or you have thoughts of suicide, and they say no, but you suspect. And I always say, go with your gut. Here's some signs. They talk about death and dying. You catch them Googling death and dying. Death and dying appears as a theme in their music, artwork, writing. They're putting their affairs in order. They're giving away prized possessions because they want to make sure they go to the people they want them to go to when they're gone. And if they give away a pet, that's for the top of the pyramid of prized possessions. And here's a counterintuitive one that's really dangerous. They've been depressed forever, and all of a sudden they're happy for no apparent reason. And you're happy because finally they're happy. They may be happy because they've chosen time, place, and method, and they know their pain is finite. Because suicide, my friends ask me, why did so-and-so want to kill himself? Chances are he didn't. He just wanted to end the pain. I just wanted to end the pain. I didn't want to die, but it was the only way I could think of to end the pain.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I always say, go with your gut. If you walk by somebody and you think it pops into your head depressed, you may have picked up a sign or symptom you weren't consciously aware of, but I always say, go with your gut and always ask, are you having thoughts of suicide? If you can't ask that, you find somebody who can. Call me and I'll ask. So, I have no problem.
So how important is support and connection when someone is in that state? How did your wife support you?
Well, coming out was one of the best things I ever did, because now she knows I wasn't just moody occasionally. I was having thoughts of suicide. And so now she can support me. And she's very funny. And one of the things that triggers my depression is disappointing her or anybody who I care a great deal about respect. Mm-hmm. And so I'll say to her, after I do something stupid, are you mad? Oh, honey, I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. So we can actually laugh about it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Here's the deal. We're a psychologist and a therapist and I are writing a series of books on men's mental health. The therapist went looking for a book on men's mental health, couldn't find it, so we decided to write one. It turned into 4 volumes, kind of a chicken soup for the soul, stories of men, by men, for men. And in there, it's a lot of car metaphors. And so it's important if you have mental illness to, and here's a car metaphor, you need a pit crew. You need to have people around you that you can be honest with about how you're feeling. And they're not going to get scared when you tell them. And they just know to listen. Because that people ask me, what do I say to my friend who's depressed? Don't say anything, simply actively listen. But if you surround yourself with people who understand what you're going through, and you can be honest with, I'm my partner in the gym. He's a retired veterinarian. And he said to me one day, how you doing? I said, I'm wretchedly depressed. And he goes, well, tell me what that looks like. I said, well, do you remember when you were 18 and every other thought you had was about girls? Mm-hmm. He goes, yeah, what's your every other thought about? Going back to bed and binge watching Netflix. He doesn't should all over me. That's a mental health term. Don't should all over me. You should do this, you should do that. Just listen. And now if it gets to the point where I was actively suicidal, then you need to get me on the phone with the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Or nowadays, for younger people, they have a text line. You text the word help to 741-741, and there's somebody on the other end about your age texting back. Because kids, young people, tend to be more forthcoming in text. So that's, it's the car metaphors. If you buy a car, you need to maintain the car. And so you need to do routine maintenance. Well, guys need to do routine maintenance. People need to do routine maintenance on their brain. And you also need, a good diet, because if you put junk gas in a car, sooner or later, it's going to malfunction. If you put junk in your body, same idea. And when I buy a car, I always get AAA, because I know someday, somewhere, probably in the rain, in the dark of night, the tire's going to go flat, or run out of gas, or it's going to break down. So you need to plan ahead. Cars have safety equipment, airbags, shoulder harnesses, seat belts. In the trunk, you got a spare tire, flares, first aid kit. If you have mental illness, you need to plan ahead for when things break down. That's the car. My favorite metaphor is this. Don't you wish the man in your life had a check engine light on his brain? So when it goes off, he goes to the mental mechanic, and the mental mechanic goes, Bob, no wonder you're depressed. You're 2 quarts low on serotonin.
Yes. Well, when are those books supposed to come out?
First 2 volumes are out. And the first volume is actually a bestseller on Amazon in the ebook form. In 3 categories. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Part of my self-care plan, by the way, we have 11 rescue cats, my little fuzzy antidepressant, and 3 rescue dogs. And I swear the one that just made the noise there, we rescue in a high kill shelter in LA. They send them up here because we have no kill. And I adopted her. And one day I was looking into her eyes and I could swear she was thinking, you rescued me. Now I'm here to rescue you. And I got choked up.
Cats tend to be able to do that. Yeah, I'm really glad to hear about those books because I feel like there isn't enough help, especially for men, because of men's tendency not to talk to people. That's my son is a person in my life that had suicidal thoughts, or still, could have at times, because he has a tendency toward depression. And he has told me that has said men need people to talk to.
Yeah, it's toxic masculinity. It's especially in the South where I grew up. Big boys don't cry. You don't share your emotion. And 8 out of 10 people who die by suicide in the U.S. are men for that reason. And Kate, men don't just not take care of themselves mentally. I've had several friends, male friends my age, have died of prostate and colon cancer. And they're eminently treatable if you get a PSA test and have a colonoscopy every so often. But men just, they're rough and tough, and they just don't. And it's a shame. But we surveyed men and said, what kind of mental health advice do you want? And they said, we want real stories of real men and how they're really coping. So each book has 12 stories. Each man has a different issue. And they say the last 500 words is how I'm coping. And then there's exercises and resources and that kind of thing wrapped around it. So it is a manual. It looks like an automobile owner's manual. We thought if we made it look that way, guys would pick it up. But we think, Kate, as in the case of your son, that a lot of women will buy it because they've got a man in their life, husband, brother, son, and they just are at a loss. How do I, they want to help, but how do you help somebody like that?
Yes, and it's harder when, like my son, he had his first suicidal thoughts at 9 years old. And I helped him, work through it as a child. Now, as a man, it's harder for me to help him. It's harder for me to even get him to communicate when I know that something is wrong.
Well, here's my phone number, Kate, for him and for all your listeners and watchers. It's 858-405-5653. 858-405-5653. I put it up on the screen every keynote that I do. And I say to the audience, look, if you're suicidal, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline or text the text line. If you're just having a bad day, call a crazy person. There's my phone number.
Okay.
Because we're less likely to be judgmental. We're just going to listen. We hear the same music. He wouldn't have to explain to me, about depression because, I've been there, almost done that. Or suicide because I've been there, almost done that. So it's the kind of thing. That's why peer counseling is so powerful. There's a story about a guy who falls down a well and he can't get out because the handholds don't go high enough. And so a family member comes by, looks down the well and says, oh man, that really is awful, but there's no way I can help. I mean, there's no way I can get down there and get back up. Walks on. A friend of his, same thing, looks down, oh man, I wish I could help you, but obviously there's no way. If I go down, I'm not coming out. A stranger comes by, sees him in the well, goes over the lip of the well, drops down to the bottom of the well. And the guy in the bottom of the well goes, what are you doing? He goes, I'm here to help you. And he goes, help me? You're now stuck in the well. And the stranger goes, yes, but I've been here before. I know the way out.
Hmm.
That's the power of a peer.
Yes.
And if your son is, tell your son, the mental health comedian said to give him a ring if you're having a tough day.
Yes.
And people
And
call.
you brought up something else that's, really typical of people with any kind of mental health problems. You often help yourself by helping other people.
Oh,
I know, because I do that too. I mean, I don't have clinical depression, but I've had situational depression. And when I feel that, the thing that I do that can get me out of it is I help other people. My son does that too, and I know a lot of other helping people that do that. But there's one thing about it is you also have to get support, or you will reach a point where, you just don't have anything left to give.
well, and there's another metaphor or simile, I guess. People who are neuronormal don't understand what it's like to live with a mental illness. And it's kind of like that Greek god Sisyphus. He gave fire to man. That was a big mistake. And I'm glad he did, because I love barbecue. But he got punished by the other gods. And his punishment was, you probably know the story, was to roll a rock up a hill every day with the idea at some point he'd get it over the top of the hill and roll back down the other side. But every time you rolled it to the top of the hill, it would roll back down to the bottom of the hill. And every day. And having a mental illness is like that. Every morning you wake up, there's a rock and a hill. Now, some days the rock is small and the hill's not so steep. Some days the rock is a boulder and the hill is Kilimanjaro. But every day there's a rock and a hill. And the day came for me and comes for a lot of people where you just cannot move the rock. And my job as a speaker is to make sure anybody hears the sound of my voice when they wake up in the morning, they can still move that rock.
Yes. And you have to have some means outside of, what you can give to other people to replenish yourself.
Yeah, I must tell you that speaking on this is very therapeutic. And because almost every time I speak, except for once, I think, somebody in the audience had chronic suicidal ideation. And I tell a story in my speech, that suicide for me and people like me is always a solution for problems large and small. Just always. And when I say small, my car broke down a couple of years ago. I had 3 thoughts unbidden: get it fixed, buy a new one, or I could just kill myself. Well, that resonates with people who have chronic suicidal ideation. And a young woman came up to me after a college presentation. She said, "Thank you for your keynote." I said, "You're welcome." She said, "But I got to tell you the truth, it made me weep." "How'd it make you weep?" She said, "Well, you know your story about the car? You had that thought to get it fixed, buy a new one, just kill yourself." She goes, "I've been having those thoughts all my life. I didn't know it had a name. I thought I was some kind of freak. And when I heard you say that out loud, I realized for the first time in my life that I am not, in fact, alone," and I wept. That, Kate,
Yes.
that's the purpose and my passion. That right there. Because, maybe I've steered her just far enough off the path to suicide that she'll live a normal life. And after all the times that happened, I was in Billings, Montana. It's dusk. The kid at the college is going to get the truck to take him back from the motel. It's starting to snow. There's a river nearby. I can hear the water. And it hit me. I'm sort of like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. I've been shown what these people's lives would be like if I were not there to speak and simply let them know that they were not alone. And my second thought was, now I can't kill myself, because I would take all those people with me who never got a chance to hear me speak and say, "You're not alone." So that's my why, that's my purpose, that's my passion. I go to bed thinking about it, wake up thinking about it. I feel very fortunate. It's my blessing and my curse. A lot of people have a doubt.
I think basically,
Go ahead.
Basically, that is one of the great, things that people seek in their life is to be understood and feel that, that they're not alone, that other people know what they're feeling or have felt what they're feeling.
And she said to me, "Frank, I was hoping I'd grow out of it." And I said, well, I'm 63. If I'm going to grow out of it, I better get started. So yeah, it's just, but I feel bad for people who don't really know what their passion and their purpose is in life. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be. Everything I've done leading up to this point in speaking, they say, you have to pick a lane, pick one thing. And when I chose suicide prevention speaking, that was it. Things started to fall into place.
Yeah.
People call me. We do my podcast. People call me. I'm going to be doing this. Would you participate? It just all began to fall into place, and it just feels right. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. So you've kind of been already talking about it, but what do you think has been the biggest thing that you've gained personally as a result of your mission and advocacy for suicide prevention?
Well, selfishly, I did realize at some point, that it is my blessing and my curse. It's just the way I'm wired. People ask, will you ever be cured? No, it's genetic. It runs in my family. I used to say that I battle depression, but that's not accurate because battle implies I can win. I realize I can't win. I can lose and die by suicide, or I can tie, which is where I sit, kind of like North and South Korea, uneasy truths with my depression. And I believe, and my third TED Talk was about this, that mental illness is not really a singularity, but a duality. It's mental illness combined with some mental ableness. Because everybody I've ever met who has mental illness, I bet your son falls into this category, I would put money on it, has some ability, something they do, or some things they do that they do extraordinarily well.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that that's all part of the wiring. The mental illness is simply the flip side of my imagination, creativity, comic ability, the way I see the world. I can teach you to write stand-up. I can teach you to perform stand-up. I cannot teach you to process that information the way I do. And if somebody said to me, Frank, look, we'll give you a pill, one time. You'll never be depressed. You'll never have another suicidal thought. However, you'll also no longer process information like a comedian. I wouldn't take it because that's who I am. It's part. And if we can convince young people, look, you have a mental illness, but here's the good news. You have got mental ableness that your peers can't touch. So we treat the mental illness, therapy, medication, whatever, and we wrap our arms around and embrace and energize and celebrate whatever mental ableness. Did you see the 60 Minutes this past Sunday night? 30 companies in the Fortune 500 are now hiring autistic people on the scale.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, for their special abilities. These are people that oftentimes could not get a job, had to go home and live with their folks. And now these companies are celebrating them and paying them handsomely for their particular ability. So they're not focusing on the disability. They're treating the disability and they understand the disability, but they're celebrating and rewarding, paying them for something that they do remarkably well. And I think if we could convince kids, children, young people of that it would change the frame for them and their peers. It would reduce bullying, stigma, and eventually suicide if we could just wrap. And I've talked to parents and they go, Frank, you're the first person ever said anything to us about there's a positive side to whatever mental illness that the young person is suffering. Because I have yet to find a young person who wasn't completely dysfunctional, that didn't have some extraordinary abilities.
Right. I actually do think that mental illnesses are heightened awareness and sensitivity.
Yeah, well, and one of the TED Talks I'm pitching right now is called Depressive Realism. There is some science that people who have depression see the world more accurately than their neuronormal peers who may be wearing rose-tinted glasses. So the point of the TEDx would be to, move depression from a disability and to an ability. Well, yeah, I have depression, but I got news for you. I tend to see the world more accurately than my neuronormal friends. I think every board of directors should have a depressed person on it. Because they come up with a great idea, and the depressed person is probably going to not play up the upside so much and see what, the downside, a more accurate view of the downside of whatever. A buddy of mine who's Jewish says it's the Jewish grandmother thing. That's how Jewish. He's like, that's how my Jewish grandmother is. Oh, Mr. Smarty Pants. That's never going to work, and I'll tell you why. Because she'll tell you every chapter. Yeah. So that again, if we can reframe.
Also, like the Jewish grandmother, she has that negative view, but she also has the coping skills.
Yes.
To deal with it usually.
Yes, and and she's going to tell you how it's going to go wrong. But she's there to comfort you when it does go wrong. Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to do is reframe mental illness as a combination of mental illness. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book David and Goliath, says of such things, it's a desirable disadvantage. You would never wish it on anybody, but it does come with advantages that neurotypical people don't have. I told my sister, who lives with anxiety and depression, I mentioned the word superpower, and she goes, "Superpower? We're not the X-Men. We're the Xanax Men."
So humor runs in the family too, huh?
Yes, and she is by the way, mentally ill and very talented. She taught memoir, short story, and poetry at Duke. That's how bright she is. Yeah, she is. Yeah. Again, I think that's her superpower, and I think it's all part and parcel of her anxiety and depression.
So I have a question you probably haven't gotten too often, but what surprised you most about life so far?
I think it was the fact that when I realized that my abilities were simply the flip side of my disabilities, that was an epiphany.
Okay.
I was driving somewhere and I was thinking about all the people I'd met who were so talented, who had mental illness, and I thought, wait a minute. That can't be a coincidence. And that's when I constructed the TEDx talk, The Revolutionary Advantages of Mental Illness. I did some research and, I've got laundry lists of celebrities, politicians, athletes. Each one has a different mental illness. And at the end of my talk, I go, look, here's the deal. You don't have to have a mental illness to be rich, famous, notable, or whatever, but it appears it doesn't hurt.
It has its advantages, huh?
Yeah, and each TEDx has been an idea occurred to me. I think people with depression, especially, we see connections where others don't see they exist. The information's out there for the TEDx, but nobody's really, curated it and put it into 12 to 18 minutes. And that's also the moment when I realized that suicide is the secret of my success, because my first wife was wonderful, but we shouldn't have been married. Insurance is a great business, which I was doing, but it was not for me. And I realized I should be doing comedy, going to open mic night. And I realized I'm suicidal. I'm going to kill myself sooner rather than later if something doesn't change. Well, second thought, what have I got to lose? I can divorce my wife, quit my job, try comedy. If it works, great. If it doesn't, I can still kill myself. So, whereas a normal person, if they did that, their last thought would be, what if it doesn't work? I'll lose everything. I had nothing to lose. I was going to die either way. I could put it on one roll of the dice. And I think a lot of people I've met entrepreneurs and entertainers have the same basic thought process. I hate my job. I hate my life. I should be doing this. I'm going to kill myself. Well, wait a minute. I could give it a shot. And, I think Anthony Bourdain, he was at Vassar, making good grades, loved food. Folks took him to Paris when he was 8, fell in love with food. And he worked in restaurants from the time he was a teenager. I think he realized, I don't belong at Vassar in this particular major. I need to be at the Culinary Arts Institute or whatever. If I don't leave this school, I'm going to kill myself. I'm just speculating. Well, what the heck? I'll try the culinary arts thing. If it works, great. If it doesn't, Kate Spade, same thing. She's working at Vanity Fair as the head of the accessories. She's the editor of the accessories section. Great job. I think she probably thought, I'm not supposed to be reviewing other people's fashions. I'm supposed to have a fashion line. She was mentally ill. She was untreated other than self-medicating. Maybe she had the same thought. What the heck? I'll leave Vanity Fair. I'll try to establish a fashion line. If it works, great. If it doesn't. But I think each one of those folks, they woke up one morning and they just couldn't move the rock, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. I think that, there probably was a way to prevent those cases, but, it just didn't happen.
Well, in Kate Spade's case, she
Yeah,
told us, I don't
Go
want to do therapy because I'm afraid it will damage my happy-go-lucky brand.
oh my goodness.
Tragic. Absolutely tragic.
Yeah, if you can't, if you can't be mentally ill, I think the next best thing for developing those same skills is having a lot of adversity in your life.
Yes, and overcoming it.
Yes.
Dyslexics. If you read Malcolm Gladwell's book called David and Goliath, he believes dyslexia is a desirable disadvantage. His research shows that if you learn to adapt, you become very successful. A lot of entrepreneurs have dyslexia.
Yes.
That's 50% of the population. The other 50% don't adjust, cope, and end up in jail. So it's all about, like you said, it's all about going through adversity, and it's how you react and the coping skills that you develop along the way. And it can either handicap you and end up in jail, or it can be a force in your life to achieve great things. So
yeah, that's what I've found with people and with myself is in the end, all of that adversity, obstacles, like I am slightly dyslexic, they turn out to be an advantage for you once you overcome them.
Well, and I've got another Zoom coming up, but I'll leave you with the advantages of dyslexia.
Okay.
Tell me if you notice this. Most dyslexics have much better peripheral vision. They tend to see the world in a panoramic fashion rather than just like this, just straight in front of them. And the second thing is most dyslexics have an amazing ability to spot the anomaly in anything. My joke is, and I'll leave you with this, never play Where's Waldo with a dyslexic for money. You're going to lose.
Okay. Never tried it, but
yeah, pick up one. See if you don't spot it right away, Kate. I'm telling you, it's amazing. But I met a guy on the ship whose child was dyslexic. Because Frank, I've been to every lecture, I've read every blog post, I've read every book. Not one person ever mentioned that my child had special abilities thanks to his dyslexia. You're the first person to mention that. I think we need to let kids know that.
Yeah, there are articles on that already, but I remember the learning to read process, and I am not, like my sister is much more dyslexic than I am, but I remember the learning to read process, and I learned to read, and then I saw my sister struggling with it. Well, I was able to help her.
Yeah, my wife is, and she has an amazing memory because she would take the book home if she was going to be reading a section the next day in front of the class. She would memorize the section, and then she'd hold the book like she was reading it, but she wasn't reading it. She was from memory doing her portion of the story. Yeah,
I can't say that I didn't do that too. But I wasn't dyslexic to the point that it was just all scrambled like some people are. It was just that I would, in a minute, turn things around, as I was going along.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But anyway, we're just about out of time. So I have one final question.
Fire away.
And that is, if you could leave the listeners with one thought from today's show, what would you want that to be?
That if someone in your life is depressed, it's not about what you say. It's about listening actively. Let them, as a friend of mine says, co-sign the BS they're going through. And two, if intuition tells you that they're depressed and perhaps suicidal, go with your intuition and ask. Because as I said, 8 out of 10 people are ambivalent, 9 out of 10 give hints. They want somebody to step up and go, hey, you're not okay. Let's go someplace private and chat about this. So Suicide is the most preventable cause of death on the planet if you step up out of your comfort zone and ask a question.
Yes, because I honestly, from looking into this and talking to people like you and talking to people who were suicidal or are suicidal, I don't believe any of them really wanted to kill themselves.
The vast majority, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. I mean, the other ones you can't say because they're hell bent on doing it. But the vast majority want somebody to step in, take notice, and stop them. Our job is not clinical. We're not doing therapy. We're just here to plant seeds of hope.
Yes. Thank you for being here and talking about this subject that is, not easy to talk about.
Come on, Kate.
I know. When you didn't show up, I tried.
Yeah. What you really want to say is, Frank, thanks this time for showing up. Oh,
yes, exactly.
Sorry I ghosted you, Kate, as the kids say.
No, that's okay. It worked out, and you were here this time, and that's what counts.
True. Well, it's been my pleasure. Let me know when it posts. I'll share it all over the place.
Okay, great. So we have another great show planned for next week. That will be October 27th, and my guest will be, no, wait a minute. That will be October 20th, and my guest will be Ted Winslow. And Ted is a musician and a producer and an entertainer, and he has over 20 albums, and he developed his own technology, sound sync tech, which is great for healing and actually could help people who are having problems with depression. And so Ted will explain all about that on the show next week. So be sure to tune in. And that will be 3 p.m. the 20th Pacific time. So I'm just going to say bye for now. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for showing up, Frank.
Wisdom with Kate Olson. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Thanks, Kate. I'm off to my next one.
Brightened your day or sparked a new thought. We have succeeded in our mission. Join us next time when we'll share more secrets and truths and all the magic of transformation that is the journey to soulfire wisdom. Always remember, be fierce in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire.